Well, thank you everyone for the invitation and also the lovely introduction. What I really want to do is share the incredible achievements of our volunteers, because it wasn't just me, it was a whole slew of people that made this happen. And if I mention one, I have to mention them all. But this is us on Parliament Hill, the week before Prime Minister Trudeau said he was going to create a carbon pricing policy for Canada that looked like climate income. And we were getting lots of hints from our parliamentarians that it was going to be a climate income like policy. And we were giddy, to say the least. And this is just some of them. That was October 2018. So I hope by the end of my 20-minute talk, you will understand the history and the policy design of Canada's carbon pricing policy. You'll be empowered by the efforts of the Canadian volunteers who worked so hard, and appreciate what Canadians did well and the lessons that they learned. A little bit of a context is we began in 2010 when Facebook was fun and useful, and we really got to coordinate a lot of I met a lot of great climate activists on Facebook in between 2008 and 2011, because that was the only reason I was there, and I met a lot. So I got to quickly grow CCL in Canada because of that. A little bit more context. Remember, we're going back to 2010. This was when, like, the heat of the climate denial. So the amount of effort that Canada had to put out in order to get where we were going was huge. So if you're looking at our numbers and start comparing to what you have to do in the UK, I advise highly against that. But I hope you get some lessons from what we did. So this is the timeline. So before 2015, we had a government that federally did nothing about climate change. I'm going to leave it at that, but it was a nightmare between 2008 and 2015. We did a lot of lobbying, and I will talk about that, and a lot of building relationships, but it was really difficult. One of the best things that the Liberals did was they formed the Pan-Canadian Framework on Clean Growth and Climate Change, and sought massive consultation from the provinces, territories, and the people of Canada. And then the federal policy was announced in October of 2018, and we started receiving our dividends in March of 2019, and the fees began in April of 2019. And October of that year, 2/3 of Canadians voted for parties with carbon pricing. So carbon pricing won the election, is what it was. The big take-home message from the pundits, not us, from October, the election 2019. And then we kept lobbying for refinements in the carbon pricing policy, and we got what we lobbied for. They put checks because we were getting income tax rebates. We asked them to study harmonized policies in our confederation, which is what we call the federal government, the provinces and the territories. And we asked them to start studying CBAMs. And all of that was in there, including a few other things. But there was still some Rubicons to cross. Our federal carbon pricing policy survived a Supreme Court challenge. And then one of the problems why we didn't have any sort of climate laws in Canada is because we had no climate accountability laws like you have in the UK. So we've also fought for climate accountability laws alongside many NGOs in Canada, and we got those as well. And in September 2021, carbon pricing survived another election. Just to remind everybody that the carbon pricing policy that we have is only for provinces that don't have their own carbon pricing policy. We have a whole slew of carbon pricing policies in Canada. Quebec and Nova Scotia have cap and trade, their own versions of it. Prince Edward Island, New Brunswick, Newfoundland, BC, and the territories have a carbon tax, that meaning that they don't get, well, in BC, they get most of the money back, but then it's not revenue neutral anymore, and some money is going into the general coffers. So we're going to start calling it a carbon tax. But federally, what we have is the Federal Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act, and it's the Backstop policy, and it now applies to Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Ontario. We are still working on our government. Not all, like it is an incrementally rising price. It should be $170 a ton by 2030, but not all GHGs are priced. I won't go into the details of that. So we need wider coverage. We are starting to get checks in 2022. It used to be in our income tax. So as you might have well guessed, nobody knew they were getting the money back. And Canada is studying border carbon adjustments. So we don't have border carbon adjustments. So we have an incrementally rising fee on carbon pollution. We have checks. We're getting money back this year in checks, and we need BCAs. And this is for those of you who are policy wonks, instead of, so the public and small and businesses have a fuel and heating fuel consumption, and that money goes back to the people. Whereas emissions intensive trade exposed industries like cement, steel, et cetera, they are under what's called a different price. It's called the output-based carbon pricing policy. And it's kind of like cap and trade without a cap. They pay a reduced price. There's lots of, free passes, get a jail-free card sort of thing. So that's the background of our policy. As well, this is what we did in Canada. We got really organized. We have 338 constituencies. We had and we covered 70 of them by the end of 2015. And we conducted 3 national conferences and 2 provincial conferences. We lobbied about 250 times over those 5 years. We documented 865 times on editorial pages. But most importantly, we empowered an MP to debate climate income in the House of Commons, and he did so repeatedly 8 times between 2013 and 2015, really educating his fellow parliamentarians, and consequently losing the election in 2015 because he converted to the Green Party. But we also produced 3 public service announcements in the lead up to the 2015 election. And what to note about this, and maybe you'll be able to, it's only 30 seconds long, is notice how we don't mention climate carbon pricing.
We insure our health, our homes, and our cars. So why not our environment? 14 of the 15 warmest years in recorded history have occurred since the year 2000. Carbon emissions are the problem. Our national safety, economic well-being, food security, and the very survival of future generations are at stake. The good news is that it is solvable. Find out how at citizensclimatelobby.ca. Let's make the environment part of the debate.
What was part of our strategy was to not talk about carbon pricing and just drive people to our website and to get more education. There's pushback when you talk about carbon pricing. So sometimes the moral of the story here is sometimes maybe don't talk about carbon pricing, go around it, be diplomatic in some circles. But I know you're looking for ways of like how to communicate it. But here are some of the biggest and hard, and I'm going to get to that at the end. Here are the biggest and hardest lessons between 2010 and 2015. We tracked everything. As you can tell, we have massive numbers associated with everything we did. We quickly kiboshed any wordsmithing of documents. Somebody would be in charge. There would be a couple editors, and then we would all look it over, but we really avoided wordsmithing like the plague. And we also learned no email discussions. They are for yes, no, or meet me here. Pick up the phone if you need to talk about anything else or have a meeting or whatever. Another thing we had to do was fundraising. And you wanted to hear some of the challenges, and yeah, we needed money to run conferences. So we learned some pretty big tips. That our fundraising has to be efficient, infrequent, and significant. We targeted all the CCL Canada members who had signed up online, and we made it a monthly action once a year. So that's how we keep going. And so you should be very specific what you fundraise for, and we fundraised to run 3 national conferences between 2011 and 2013, and then conducted those conferences in 2013, 2014, and 2015. Most importantly, we learned that meeting every month, which you all do, is really importantly, and also meeting locally regularly as much as possible. Have an agenda that includes an education piece, sharing actions, and reviewing monthly actions and laser talks is what we did. And you have to have national conference and lobbying days. So moving forward in time, now we have a new government, and between 2016 and 2017, we grew to from 36 chapters out to 84 constituencies. Sorry, I used the English word, the Canadian word for constituencies. And we conducted 5 national conferences and lobbying days and 2 provincial ones. And we lobbied like crazy, almost 240 times each year. And we appeared in the newspapers over 1,300 times. And down below here is a lovely reception that we held that had 4 out of the 4 political parties show up. And here's us meeting with the conservative environmental team in 2017 to talk about climate income. And yeah, so it was great. And then we got what we lobbied for, and we continued to grow and produce lots of stuff. And in between 2019 and 2021, we had to go through a couple of elections, and we grew to 41 active chapters. But as you can see here, there's this thing called the action tracker at CCL Community, and it tracks our progress. And we actually went down in media publications and lobbying because we really emphasized the importance of self-care in 2021. Canada has some of the strictest lockdown rules, especially in Ontario, in all of the world. So COVID was, really weighing heavily on a lot of our volunteers. And there was major disasters like the heat dome that settled in over British Columbia, and also other things that just kept happening. So on the fires and everything. So we started, actually telling people not to work. Basically, July and August was a write-off. So as well as an election. So we do emphasize taking care of our volunteers. Here are some of the most important lessons that we learned. Stay utterly focused on lobbying for climate income. And you can support other evidence-based and socially just policies in many ways by showing up to their events, by having them speak on your calls, etc. I think you all know all that. If you're new to CCL, and I know many of you have done this, but the motivational interviewing workshops are very powerful. We review the core values regularly. And I would like to just say that the CCL USA trainings needs to be contextualized to all countries. That includes the climate advocate training and the 5 levers of political will training, which are the 2 major training things that they do in the USA to get their volunteers ready to do this work. But it needs to be contextualized to all countries, and Canada has done so, and we do so for many countries. Begin all projects with the end in mind. And for us, it's like, how is this going to build political will for climate income? And I'm going to talk a minute about our national action teams and how they get stuff done. And I want you to keep in mind, we did all this without any paid staff. And we were utterly focused on action and on carbon fee and dividend, while keeping in mind other policies. These are some of our action teams, and they all have like specific things that they're going to be producing this year. So the group leaders will be nurturing new group leaders. There's climate advocate training team that's going to learn how to, they're going to be trained to do the training, and etc. We have a whole bunch of them, a whole bunch of teams. And the last piece I'd like to talk about before we go into a discussion is communicating carbon pricing. I live in a big country as well, and there are many distinct regions, and I know the same as for the United Kingdom. Welsh are different than Northumbrians, who are different from Borderland Scottish, who are different from Highland Scottish, who are different from people who live in London. Like you have to be a chameleon, and depending also on the political leaning of the person. So always know your audience, always and also filter your lobbying asks through as many people as possible. I don't feel comfortable advising you in the UK on what would be the best buzzword to blast through, because I think every country is specific, and it's also a moving needle. I'm thinking that focusing on the dividend rebate or income is probably the best way to go. But at the same time, I want to say that, don't stress too much over words. And no, oh, that should say not that word, no, the other, the KNOW, know when to not talk about carbon pricing. So thank you, merci. I am open to questions and discussion. I hope this gets the discussion going.
Wow, that's fantastic. Thank you, Cathy. I'm assuming there's loads of people all eager to speak up and ask questions and engage in discussion with Cathy.
Could you possibly be more specific about how you managed to get in touch and stay in touch with all of these people at the first, a small group empowering other people, I guess, without any paid staff, without anybody, nobody was able to give their full time to it? I mean,
I worked full time as a volunteer between 2011 and 2017. I was literally full time. I quit my job and did this full time. And my background is education. I'm a former science, maths, and special ed teacher at the high school level, also adult education. And as well, I spent 7 years at a university coordinating university students, professors, and staff's outreach into Northern Ontario. So I really got hyper connected and really good at volunteer management as well as event management. So I was basically donated my professional skills for 6 years. And that in itself built the institutional wisdom to get this off the ground. But I don't want to take full credit. We did, and because we had no paid staff, it was actually a gift because we didn't have time for fluff. We didn't have, there's no time. It's like the volunteers are giving 5 to 10 hours a month. What do you want to do? We have to meet, we have to get them to the point where they can talk about carbon pricing, and we have to get them lobbying, and we have to get them building political will locally, and we have to train them to do that. And they always had to begin with the end in mind. If they suggested an action for us, how is this going to help our volunteers build political will locally? And Canada has the same context as you have, is that we have that 350-year-old system of direct representation, where we're directly represented by our members of parliament. So building political will locally was really critical. So how did we do it? We literally met 3 times a month to discuss the monthly actions, and volunteers in Canada have been getting monthly actions since September 2010. And we started meeting monthly as Canadians in November of 2011, when I finally quit my job and got all settled down into what I wanted to do. We also started our own educational pieces, and we also laid out, we had our whole group, our best group leaders, or our most engaged group leaders, help create national plans every 2 years to keep us on track. So that's how we did it. So lots of meetings, but very focused meetings with agendas, no complaining, no, I don't mean complaining, oh, the government's not going to do this, or no cynicism. It was very focused on getting stuff done. It's okay, who wants to help with the national conference? And then get them on a team. Okay, what? And then go through the bucket list. So of things that need to be done. So I'm just very action focused. I get things done really quickly to the point that it annoys some people, but it's a powerful thing when you have no money and no time, right? So that's how we did it. And incredible teams. I am going to mention a few. I'm going to say Marlo Ferme stepped up and started running a lot of the CCL monthly calls for me. I got stopped doing that starting in 2016. He started helping write the action sheets. We developed a really solid conference and lobbying team that could get stuff done. So building a lot of institutional wisdom and teams. And I think the last thing is don't email each other. Big, huge lists of things. Get in on meetings and just create Google Docs and just go through them and get stuff done.
Can you give me an example of one of your national actions? What are your first national actions? I mean, this is of national actions that you then track reminds me of the years I spent with results, which I found incredibly satisfying. We have found, I think we have found that difficult to do.
Yeah, well, okay, so we had, well, every, like, lobbying. So we actually track our lobbying, and we have a national lobbying aspect. You're asking about a national project. We did like postcards.
You start off and you have an action every month.
3 actions every month. Oh, so this month it is be a CCL ambassador. So come in on like the CCL training or the CCI informational calls, and actually try to recruit people on the calls to CCL Canada, because we have the informational calls. Another action is, if you're going to be get involved in any of those international and national days of actions in the first 6 months, you need to start planning now, because there's the Fridays for Future event on March 25th. There's Earth Day, April 22nd. There's another national thing in Canada. And there's also World Environment Day. And I'm forgetting. Oh yeah. And the third action is create or update your MP bio in preparation for lobbying in May. So that's this month.
Who keeps track of the people?
They keep track of it themselves. CCL has what's called the action tracker, and they enter their own field reports. Have you ever seen the action tracker?
Nope.
Do you want me to show you the action tracker?
Yeah, let's see that.
Okay, I'm going to warn you ahead of time. It's still USA centric. So as a non-US, so you have to like just put on your blinders and like just ignore a little bit of it. But for the most part, it really works. But you have to, yeah. So let me just share my, I gotta go Google it. Just give me a second. But it really is super, super duper helpful.
Yeah. While you're doing that, people on the bottom of the screen, if you wave them that mouse to the bottom of the screen, you often see reactions towards the right of the bottom. And then if you click on that, you've got the option to raise hand. Yep, like Joe's done.
Okay, I'll show you the action tracker. I'm just going to share my screen. So the volunteers themselves enter their own field reports, and that's how I can generate those beautiful graphs. And it's very motivating, and it also helps us generate a little bit of a sense of competition, you know, without forming jealousies. But it's fun, you know, you need a little bit of competition. So when I land, or this is actually my daughter's CCL community site. I like to use this for teaching purposes because my CCL community looks different than yours. But anyways, when she lands on the CCL community, hers looks Canadian, yours might not, yours might look American, whatever. What you need to do is go up into the corner and you'll see log and track actions. So you go here and you can, there's 2 places where you can enter log an action. And okay, so I'm going to want to log contact with a legislator. And some of you may be like at the subnational level in Canada and the USA, we call it state or province. So this is where you might get annoyed. And then if you're lobbying nationally or federally, you just click there. And let's say I want to talk about a lobby meeting. And okay, and I can put UK, there, UK Edinburgh, right? And I can say it was a meeting with a member of parliament, and it doesn't work. Oh no, oh, it's because I'm Canadian, so it's thinking I'm Canadian. Yeah. So it might not work for you. I'll do it as a Canadian. That's going to be a pain in the butt. Oh no, another thing I have to fix in this system. It's not mine, and it takes hours to. Okay, but anyways, we track in here, and then go here. Oh, that's a bummer. I have to check that. Drop downs. I didn't think the drop downs would occur. You're gonna have to test it yourself. It's still gonna. That's a bummer. Yeah. Okay, and then you just put your meeting notes in here, and then it tracks it for us. That's it. But I think there's certain things. No, the drop down menus are still gonna get in the way. Okay, so for contact with legislator. because it's still, but maybe it's because I'm Canadian. So yeah, okay, but more importantly, so maybe you can't use this yet, but that's how we track. And this is like Canadian data that we can generate. This is the past year. Okay, so
Wow.
yeah, but it is cool, but there are other ways to track data. I know you can put in your own media hits for sure. So let me go back. But I think the lobbying is going to be a bit of a pain.
Okay,
So,
to me,
yeah.
this seems like years more complicated than we could get into.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, but just so you know, that's how we track data.
Yeah, great. So was there a way when you just started out, before you had a big fancy
Okay.
thing like that, when you just started out and you were just getting a handful of people involved, what did you do then?
We had monthly meetings where actions completed was part of the agenda and somebody would type it out.
Okay, so actions completed at that stage should just be, I recruited somebody. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be a harder one. It would like that. The major actions we were looking for were letters to the editor, op-eds, and meetings with members of parliament. Those were the main things we were tracking. Yeah.
That's great. Can we move on?
Yep.
Joe, on my screen, he's top left. So off you go, Joe.
Yeah. Cathy, could you enlighten the group a bit more about what your ambassadors are doing to try to get some reference to climate income in with, per what I emailed you about the World Bank State and Trends of Carbon Pricing, and also the Carbon Pricing Leadership Coalition. Some of these big publications talking about carbon pricing, they don't mention fee and dividend or climate income. Could you tell us what's happening there?
Okay, so I'm going to say it in a way that might be not 100% accurate. That's why I didn't even want to email it. So Joe Robertson actually goes to the World Bank, and Joe Robertson actually sits on one of the boards at the Carbon Pricing Leadership Coalition. And, it's all, and he's like he's basically what I meant by ambassadors. He's the person who's just trying to get climate income in there. As well, when we go to seminars hosted by the Carbon Pricing Leadership Coalition, we're trying to nudge as well to get it in there because it is so different. We're trying, we're trying because it's not anytime somebody talks about carbon pricing, it's either carbon tax, which is not what we are, or cap and trade, which is not what we are. So, yeah. It is an issue, and getting documents to reflect that would be nice.
David, are you good to go?
Let others go first. I can pester Cathy anytime.
Okay, the Charlesworths.
Hello.
We want to ask about fundraising, how you went about fundraising, what you spent it on, and how much you needed.
We needed about $14,000 every time we did a conference to pay for the food for the members, and also to look to parliamentarians that we were really serious. So we didn't want to get like a church basement conference. We wanted to get in a real conference hotel and invite politicians to come to receptions at this place and host them as, potentially as a group that had money that really didn't. So, oops, I said it here for the internet. Okay, so we figured it was about $14,000 conference. That meant charging our members about $300 each to attend, which was just gonna not happen. So we realized we needed to raise about $7,000 to $10,000 for every conference, so we could really knock down the price to like $50 to $100, or even make it no price for many of our volunteers. We spent the money that we raised specifically on renting a venue, getting really good audio equipment, and I mean really good audio equipment. We hired the same people parliamentarians do, because if the audio sucks, nobody's going to hear what happened, right? Like audio is so important, and they also did our visuals. So to make sure we have excellent, like highest quality audio visuals, and also our food. So those were the three major costs, but then there's also the lesser costs, which are paper and stuff like that. We fundraised separately and found money separately ourselves. The conference team also to pay for our travel eventually. So a couple of ways one of the ways we did that is for those who were registering and had money, they could donate money to the conference team so they could pay us to go. And that usually got most of it because we needed like about $2,000 to pay for the hotel fees for about 3 days. So that's the only thing we raised money for, because we didn't want to start like divvying money out here, there, everywhere. We just wanted money for conferences, take that money from the conference out and refund whoever, put it all on their credit card, which was me. My husband loved me putting $15,000 on the credit card. Anyways, and how did we fundraise? We fundraised by making it a monthly action. So we talked about it on our monthly meetings, the importance of it, let people talk it through. We coached them how to ask their fellow members, family members. We sent it out to all the people on our mailing list. But the best way to fundraise is to ask people, to actually ask people. And you will be surprised. I flippantly asked my MP to donate money to CCL while we were at a party and had drank too much scotch, and he did. So you just never know. And I don't normally drink scotch, but so you physically, you have to ask people to donate money. That's the best way. That's it. That's all. But only do it once a year and be very focused, and maybe bring in somebody to train people to do it. It's more intimidating than lobbying. Asking people for money. It's the worst. But it's a blast. It's like jumping out of an airplane when you get the money. So it's kind of fun too. So it's extremely intimidating, but extremely rewarding.
Very good. Yeah, I'm taking drink scotch as one of the tips.
And smoke cigars.
Thank you.
It was a cigar and scotch fundraiser. We both found ourselves at. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so Catherine next, and then Marie, I think, so keen to go.
Hi, Cathy. I'm a bit confused about what industries pay, the carbon fee that they pay, and also at the moment, because of the fuel crisis in the UK. I just read today that it said, the UK's got a higher carbon price than the EU at the moment. Did you find a lot of resistance from industries, and how they taken it?
Okay, so we have no. Actually, that one of the reasons why we got the carbon pricing policy we got in Canada was because of the Pan-Canadian framework on clean growth and climate change, and also because of the Carbon Pricing Leadership Coalition. Catherine McKenna was the Honorable Catherine McKenna was the Minister of Environment and Climate Change during the Paris Agreement and through most of the way through to 2019, and she. She was all the way to 2019, actually, between 2015 and 2019. And when she was made co-chair of the Carbon Pricing Leadership Coalition, which seeks to have not just NGOs and not just governments, but also industry and business, part of the Carbon Pricing Leadership Coalition, she got the largest number of businesses to sign up to the Carbon Pricing Leadership Coalition. It was well over 100. It included the biggest oil companies. It included our biggest supermarkets. It included our biggest banks. So she got the right people at the table. So there was very little resistance from the major industries. I mean, what we do fight against is the pushback comes mostly from all the little players in the oil sands that are going to lose their shirt as the carbon prices rise because they're not ready. And they have lots of money. So we do get pushback from them. And so, yeah, no, that's where most of our pushback comes from. That and from what we think is Vladimir Putin, who doesn't like Canada right now, and we're under attack on social media. But I'm sure you're seeing what's happening in the UK and Canada right now. If not, I don't want to talk about it. So anyways, silly things are happening right now in my country. We're under kind of a War Measures Act, like pocketed martial law in parts of the country right now. So major social media stuff happening. I just said it. Now I triggered myself again. No, I didn't. Okay, so it's okay. We're fine where we are. It's just parts of Canada are it's whatever. But did that help answer your question, Catherine?
Yeah, but sorry, do they pay a rise in carbon price at the point of production, extraction?
Okay, so businesses that produce under 10 megatons of, or is it 10 megatons? Any 10 something tons? Okay, I can't remember what, I think it is megatons. No, it's lower than that. Anyways, a certain level, they're not allowed to opt into this alternate carbon pricing policy. And then businesses and industry that are produced between, I can't remember what it's like this middle range, they can opt in, and any over a certain amount are automatically put in this separate bucket. And it's called the output-based carbon pricing. And basically, there's like a whole bunch of like sub files for it. So if you're oil industry, you're held to a certain standard. If you're cement, you're held to a certain standard. If you're steel, you're held to a certain standard. And if you meet that standard, you get to not pay a price. Okay. And if you're below that standard, you get I think you actually get a credit. And if you're above that standard, you have to pay a price. But the price is about 1/10 of what consumers pay. And it also, there's a lot of free allowances, just like in the cap and trade system in the UK and in Europe. Okay, so it's a cap and trade system without a cap. Is basically what it is. Okay. Yeah. And so we're lobbying to get certain things out of that output-based pricing system as fast as possible, because they're not emissions intensive nor trade exposed, and therefore it's de-incentivizing the production of clean energy in Canada.
Great, that's helpful. Thanks.
Okay, Maria, really.
Hi, Cathy. I'm interested in looking at any statistics which I can find online which show the effect, or debatably the effect, of carbon income in Canada, in any of the states, reducing carbon emissions. I'm quite interested in, like if there's evidence which I can refer to when I'm talking about carbon income to my friends or my MP or whoever I may be talking to.
I would love that data too, but unfortunately, COVID is going to interfere with any sort of data. It's just the impacts of COVID on our economy and on our energy consumption and production, and how that's going. There's no way of teasing out whether it's COVID or the rising carbon price at this point. I have not been able to find any. People ask that question all the time, but I do. So the price started in April of 2019, and less than a year into it, we were in the COVID pandemic. I'll never forget 2 days after the pandemic was struck, seeing gas at 60 cents a liter here in Canada. Like, because and now it's $1.70 a liter. Like, I mean, it's crazy. Energy prices and energy consumption is like so hard to track because of this pandemic. So just going to be impossible at this point. But there's lots of modeling that shows it'll work. There's modeling in nature. There's modeling at On-Roads. We have Canadian modeling through the Pembina Institute. We have previous experiences with the BC carbon tax that showed all the commodities that were under the carbon price. There was a reduced consumption in those commodities that were under the carbon price. So the gas you know, the gas and the heating oil and stuff like that. So it's known to work. And there's also real world data of countries that have carbon pricing policies have a lowered consumption of fossil fuels compared to countries that do not. And the higher the carbon price, the stronger the impact. So there is a ton of data like that out there. And if you want it, yeah, just I can maybe share a PowerPoint with you or two where you can just tease through and find the data. And I'll put my email in the chat, but it is wonky. But the answer is no, there's no Canadian data yet. None whatsoever. Okay.
Thanks. Great. I'll put my hand up because I want to ask a question myself. And I've been trying to sort of hint to people like Labour politicians that there's the opportunity they have now for like a legacy policy, in the same way that the Labour policies after 1945 have bedded in and everyone loves them. Any colour of politician is not going to get votes by repealing the NHS, for example. And I'm saying that carbon fee and dividend is like that, because once people understand it and they get their dividend checks, they realise what a good thing it is and will not want it repealed. So we've now got a few years of actual real politics in Canada since this happened, and people who aren't really watching the news every night and following everything are beginning to find out what's going on with fee and dividend, which they wouldn't have done before. So could you talk us through all of that, Cathy?
Like, what's the specific question? I'm sorry.
How has the politics around fee and dividend changed now that it's actually a government policy rather than a group of lobbyists?
Well, there's some good there. Like, it's survived 2 elections, and you know, the Conservatives are having a really hard time. Unfortunately, we have what's called retail politics in Canada, and I'm sure it's the same everywhere around the world. You want to distinguish yourself from the other parties by having your own suite of policies. And unfortunately, we stole the Conservatives' policy and gave it to the Liberals. So they don't have a policy. So if I try to not think about the disruptive disinformation that's happening with regards to carbon pricing in our country, I can tell you that the 4 provinces that have to do carbon pricing are all conservative, and they have not, they have taken the federal carbon pricing policy. They have not changed it. So, because all the governments can decide their own carbon pricing policy, and so that the Ontario government, the Saskatchewan government, the Alberta government, and the Manitoba government, they're all conservative, and they've not changed it. So that's rather telling. So it is a conservative policy, but I think it's also because it's also a left-leaning policy. This reduction of income and basically once and for all giving people money for nothing, because most of us don't grow our own food, and jobs and income security are becoming, job security and income security are becoming a real issue. I mean, giving people money for nothing so that they can just have money so they can buy things and trusting them is a whole new way of thinking. And I think once people in Canada, the problem is that dividend was embedded on one line of like 500 lines in our income tax in Canada. So most people didn't know they do it. And for the record, I've never filled in an income tax form in my entire life. So I never would have known I got it if I wasn't a climate activist. My mother did my income tax, then my husband did my income tax because I hated doing it. And now I have a tax person do my income tax. So most people don't know they get it. So really importantly, that dividend check. And last thing I'd like to say to deal with the disruptive disinformation, because I honestly think there's a certain government in this world where the leader has totally backed himself into a corner with regards to making his country like too much like the 19th century or maybe the 20th century and has not stepped into the 21st century. And they're too dependent on oil and gas. And once that starts to decline, his country is really going to be in big trouble because he's not been able to, make a more livable economy and a prosperous economy for all of his country because he's stolen too much of it and given too much of that money away. And I'm not saying the name of the country, but I think they're also like on the verge of attacking another country right now. And they're also interfering with our democracy here in Canada. I think to deal with that prevention of the disruptive disinformation, I think we need our governments to develop public education policies about carbon pricing and about the climate emergency and about evidence-based policy. I think that's, otherwise, without this public education, it's just going to be a football that goes back and forth between parties and we never get this done. So that's just an observation. I don't know if I answered your question or just.
Yeah. Do you think when the checks come that it will be less of a thing that's bounced about and bedded in better?
Yeah, except for they'll say on social media and on WhatsApp that you're paying way more than what you're getting from your check. So there's a lot of disinformation like that. Yeah. Yeah, it's an ongoing, and it's so Machiavellian, right? It's Machiavellian between the politicians in our countries and between countries, especially that one country that's really misbehaving on the international scene. Okay,
I need to let someone else in. David, do you want to have a question, David Wilson?
Yeah, I'll come in at that point. I was interested in your action groups. In particular, how you decided which ones you needed, how many people are in each one, how it works, how they communicate with each other, everything about that structure. If you could just give me a bit more about that.
They're based on two things: what needs to get done and the interests of the volunteers. The best teams have less than 7 people, and once it gets over 7 people, you start structuring them so they know who the lead is and everybody has jobs. And we emphasize, and it's hard, that begin with the end in mind. We lobby for carbon pricing. So and then we do other things to help push that forward. So we're not a think tank. So we're about getting action done. So begin with the end in mind. What actions is your group gonna come up with? Because having these groups that just do research that others have already done, and then summarizing it again, not helpful. So it's what needs to get done and what the volunteers want. So the volunteers wanted a conservative action group to help, formulate strategies and actions that will help work with conservatives. Bonus, okay? The leave behind team. So every year we have to develop a lobbying ask. They drill down into the policy and really come up with the best 5 or 6 actions that we can, 5 or 6 lobbying asks that we can ask of our members of parliament to help protect and improve the Canadian carbon pricing policy. And they spend about 7 or 8 calls on that. So the monthly actions team, they just meet monthly and they say, what are going to be our actions? And then they write them out and then they send them out and then they, so yeah. So it's basically getting stuff done. Was that helpful, David?
That's very helpful. Yeah. Are some of the action groups then temporary? It's just set up to do something and then they dissolve again?
Yeah. So for example, Canada does not have our Senate. We don't vote for it. It's actually a appointed Senate. So we lobby them infrequently. So only when we lobby do we put together this Senate lobbying team, because we have to have the Senate on side. So we're trying to nurture my senator who's guided me between 2011 and 2021 retired. And then my own senator died of COVID in November.
Oh.
She was my age and she was doubly vaxxed. So we're seeking to find that a couple senators that will keep us in the loop, because policy still has to go through the Senate and they will alert us, of any problems or just tell us to calm down. It's a cakewalk, and also give us some advice on how to talk to the government a couple times a year. So yeah, some do dissolve. We have a team right now that's it's called Team SIVO, and it's looking at putting volatile anesthetics in the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act, because some of our experts have calculated 0.2% of greenhouse gas emissions come from volatile anesthetics in Canada. So putting a price on carbon pollution will greatly reduce that, because one of those anesthetics has a carbon footprint about, well, I can't remember the number, but about 1,000 times more than the other. So you literally like massively decrease the carbon footprint of the operating room. So that will be a temporary team. Once they achieve their goal, it's going to disappear, but we're going to buy them a beer before they disappear.
Lovely. Great. Well, we're just at the 9 o'clock limit. So, Cathy, if we all go off mute so we can express our gratitude to you, that would be great. It's been an absolute pleasure having you with us, and really challenging with all this action that you've been leading and telling us about. It's just amazing. So thank you so much, and have a great time till we have you again. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.